TMX. Hi. So I may be a little nervous and maybe a little, blah. So bear with me as we go through this. Thank you, Margot. Thank you. All right, so I want to start off actually with some questions for y'all. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. So what would you do? What would you do if in your community a participant with a marginalized, watch it, identity talks, says something, and is then ignored, but then a participant with a more privileged identity says something really similar, and that person is listened to and praised for what they just said? What would you do?
Say something.
Most people won't. What would you do if a person with hair like mine, we're rocking it, right, walks by and then a colleague says, "Why does she always look so unprofessional?" What would you do?
So what makes you say that?
Yeah. What would you do if you're hanging with your friends and then one said, "Well, my teen just said that they're using the pronouns they, them now." And another friend says, "Well, why do we have to indulge them? Why can't they just use normal pronouns?" What would you do?
Say that isn't normal.
What would you do if your community centers privileged identities in their content and no one thinks it's a problem, but you want to reach a diverse audience? What would you do then? You would hope, right? Here's the thing. Some of these questions may make you uncomfortable. Some may have the answer to them. Some may not, right? But none of these are isolated incidents, and none of these are okay. And it happens more often than you think. These are just 4 examples, right? And if you didn't know, well, now you know, because what are we going to do? So it's like the great Maya Angelou said, one of my favorites. She said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." So we're going to build in some awareness here today, and we're going to do better because we're going to know better. And we're going to take this journey together. This is going to be a journey from being passive to being active in our work and life. A journey from sitting comfortably in our privileged identities and our ability to ignore things to probably being a little bit uncomfortable and not able to ignore anymore. A journey from being perfect and upholding perfectionist ideals, which is a construct of white supremacy. For those who don't know, now you know, right? To doing things a little bit imperfectly. And that's okay because it will still have impact. We're going to take a journey from this cycle of learning into action, imperfect action. We're going to take a journey from being a community leader to being a community disruptor. So, before we dive in, I want you to get to know and understand the perspective that you are getting today. Who is this person on this stage talking to me, asking me all these questions? Well, we're going to get a little TMI, a little too much information about who I am and my perspective. Because it's important because I want you to have that awareness of my lens, my perspective, my biases as I come into this. Have an understanding of what that could be. And also understanding my relationship to power and privilege. Where do I fall? So some of my identities are marginalized. Some you can see, right? And some are privileged. And a lot of those you can't see. So they're under the surface, kind of just like an iceberg. The top you can see, the bottom you can't see because it's under the water. But this will help you put me, my lens, as I said, my biases, my perspective into perspective for you. So here we go. I am Abbiola Ballah. My pronouns are she and her. I am a cisgender woman of color of mixed ethnicity. I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean, but I've lived internationally the majority of my adult life. As Margaret said, 7 country moves, not to 7 countries, but just moving 7 times country-wise. Anyway, I'm educated. I speak 3 languages, Japanese being one of them. I have some neurodivergence, which shows up, and sometimes I forget words, so feel free to help me if I do. That's okay. I have mostly stable mental health most of the days, like we all do. I am not very able-bodied right now, right? And that's okay. I am a visual learner, process thinker, walk the world in a larger body. I own my own business for an education studios, and I am now and have always been an educator. So because I've lived in so many countries and cities, community is near and dear to my heart. It means so much to me. And what you do as community leaders is near and dear to my heart. And I want you to be able to center diversity, equity, and inclusion into what you do. So now that you know a little bit more about me and why I'm here, I can't ask each and every one of you about you because, too many, not enough time, right? But here's what I do know about why you're here. And if I'm wrong, feel free to challenge me later on. All right, so I know that you want to be breaking down oppressive systems, or you wouldn't be sitting here listening to me, right? Because you saw the title, it said Disruptor. You wouldn't be here. I also know that you believe diversity, equity, and inclusion is important, but may have the question of, how do I put that into practice that actually has impact? You might also be overwhelmed, frustrated, scared of making mistakes, not sure where to start, or just have a lot of questions. And that's okay. We're gonna be addressing most of these things, but a quick disclaimer and a little breakdown about our talk today. So, we're not here to change the world in one fell swoop. If you were looking for that, wrong talk, okay? That, my friends, is some grand gestures-ish, and we're not about that. Because grand gestures are difficult to realistically accomplish, right? And they're not sustainable. But small actions, which is what we're gonna be talking about, lead to bigger impact to create longer lasting change. So we're gonna start making it just a little bit better, starting with our orbit. That's what we're gonna do today. So think about that. You're also probably gonna be leaving with more questions, sorry, but you will have more awareness, which is what I want for you. And through some stories, insights from my experiences and clients, you will get some tools that you can probably start implementing into your specific situation. And I will have a challenge for you, because as I said, educator, homework, of course, gonna happen. And we will start disrupting one small action at a time. All right, so I wanna set the stage for you. There has been a lot of disillusionment in the DEI industry and the world. The landscape is spicy right now. I'm sure you know that. And a lot of people seeing DEI as a threat rather than something that is a benefit to crafting a better world for all of us to live in. In every industry, there's a fight for budget, there's a lack of communication as to what DEI looks like, a lack of training, a lack of people to implement the training, and sometimes it's hardly discussed. And also sometimes it's seen as a nice to have instead of a need to have. So with all those challenges, where does that leave us? What do we do if we want to do this work? If we want to disrupt, if we want to make an impact, right? How do we be disruptors if we're living in this type of world? All right, so I've used the word disruptors many times, and just saying disrupt, and it's even a part of my title, the title of my talk, right? From community leader to community disruptor. But what does it mean to disrupt, to be a disruptor? So I want us to get to the same page on terms because As an educator, I tell all my clients, we need to be on the same page as to what we are all talking about. So a disruptor is someone who has made a commitment to center DEI into their work and life. And that includes, I say diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it also includes accessibility. It also includes belonging. It also includes social justice, right? They're someone who's intentionally working towards breaking down oppressive systems in their orbit through tangible action taking in the form of small actions, small steps. So I've been talking about those small steps for a bit, and I want to make this hit home for you just a little bit more. So has anyone heard the story, just a quick sidebar, of the crow and the water jug? It's an Aesop fable. Maybe you heard it when you were a kid. Wow, I see some nods, yes, and I see some no's. So I'm gonna tell it real quick. So there was a crow. It was flying around and it was thirsty. The crow saw a water jug on a windowsill and decided to go down to the windowsill, grab some water. But when it got there, it saw that there was just a little bit of water and its beak couldn't reach it because it was deep. So what did the crow do? It looked around and saw on the ground that there was a bunch of pebbles. Crow flew down to the ground, picked up one pebble in its mouth, flew back up, dropped it in the water jug. What happened? The water went up just a So the crow did it again. Over and over, one by one, again and again, the crow flew down, picked up a pebble, dropped it in the water jug. A lot of patience, that crow, right? Until finally, the water rose to a space where the crow could drink. Small actions, creating a big change. That is what we do as disruptors. That is what we are committing to. So what does that look like in practice? So our first what would you do question is actually a version of this happened to a client of mine. And she came into our one-on-one coaching session and told me about it. So she was in a meeting, someone with a marginalized identity said something, and no one listened, but another person said something with more privileged identities, and everybody listened. What did my client do at that moment? Absolutely nothing. She felt horrible afterwards, but she didn't do anything. We talked about it, and I asked her why. She said, well, I was second guessing. I didn't want to make waves. I didn't want to draw attention. I didn't know if this was the right time. I didn't want to make things worse. It wasn't my place. What if that person didn't want attention, all the things, right? All the feelings. And they were all valid. We all have those, and they are all valid. But what I like to do in our sessions is that we go deep, right? DEEP. So we disrupt and dismantle. We expose the gaps and the weak spots. We then evolve through questioning, and then we persist. How are we going to move forward? How are we going to assess and iterate on our actions? And that's what we did. And the actions that came out of that is that my client then decided to go back to that person who was not heard in the meeting, apologize to them for not saying anything, and then say, at the next meeting, I'm going to give you the floor. I'm going to personally make it my role, let's go with that word, to give you the floor. So that's what she did. At the next meeting, I think was 2 weeks later, she said, hey, our friend here was speaking at our last meeting. We did not hear her, and she has something important to say. Let's listen. Not a huge thing, not perfect in any way, shape, or form. Some of you may have done something different, I'm sure, but that's okay. My client, she amplified a voice that was not heard, and it worked in that situation. It was a step in the right direction. So I want you to note a few key things here for when you're moving forward with disrupting. My client wasn't able to respond in the moment, and that was okay, because she needed to process and think through her own reactions to what happened and really decide what she wanted to do. She was feeling bad that she didn't do something, but she let it be uncomfortable. And sometimes we have to sit in that uncomfortable feeling. But what she did is she took awareness of that action, what she was feeling, and knowing that it was not right, and she put those thoughts into actual action. And it was never too late for her to do something. It may have happened 2 weeks later, but that's okay. You can always come back. All right, so remember we were talking about being a little bit uncomfortable? I have an uncomfortable question for you. Are you really committed to disrupting? Or are you really committed to having the title of disruptor? There's a big difference between the two. And no shade, either which way you fall, but we have to be honest with ourselves about that. There are so many out there that love the title of disruptor, but when it comes to actually doing the actions, all of a sudden, their Uber is like a couple minutes away and they gotta go home and bathe their cat. I mean, I don't know, but something sounds a little fishy right there. But it's also understandable because disrupting and committing to disrupting is hard. It's hard as, I don't know if I can curse yet, AF, right? It's frustrating too because, you don't see the return, that instant impact is not there, and that instant change, we usually can't see it because it doesn't all happen at once. And that's frustrating for us living in 2023 when we want everything right now, right now. So remember that crow and the water jug? Patience, one pebble at a time. All right, disrupting in the community space. And don't worry, I see your faces like, finally, she's gonna tell us what to do. I see y'all. But guess what? I don't do checklists. So there's not gonna be a checklist at all because DEI is filled with nuances and it's gonna be different for every situation. But you are gonna be able to think about what I'm saying. How does this fit in to your specific situation? All right, so it starts with the foundation, right? As with everything. It starts with actually centering DEI principles in your work and life. And yes, I did say life because DEI cannot have an impact in a bubble. You can't say, hey, I'm all for this at work, but then you close down your laptop or you walk out the door and be like, home time, DEI, what? No, it doesn't work like that. It has to be part of every aspect if you are going to truly disrupt. You also need to be looking for gaps in those policies, practices, processes, workflows, SOPs, whatever it is. Which of those are upholding the tenets of oppressive culture? And how are they doing that? Gotta be honest with yourself and ask those hard questions. Make yourself uncomfortable. It's gonna be okay. I promise. That part I can promise. Right? So I wanna just dive into some of those initial questions that I want you to start asking yourself. Remember, we went a little bit TMI earlier with me, letting you know my perspective? Well, I need you to do that too. What perspective are you bringing to the table? What is your relationship to power and privilege? How many of you really want to dig in and answer that? Not many people. What are your intersectional identities, right? Identity is not only what we can see. And what biases come with those? How do they affect how you approach building the foundation of those policies, practices, policies, processes that I was talking about before? What does this look like within the community? What are their intersectional identities, their privileges? Who is being heard and who has the power to make changes? So many questions, so little time. but they are integral if you are navigating these disrupting streets, my friends. They are. All right, so what does this look like in practice? I had a little story here for you, but we're running out of time, and I want you to have a little bit of time to ask me questions. So is it okay if I skip the story? Yeah? All right. All right. It was about words having power, and they do. Just think of the third question I asked you, right? Okay. No checklist, but we're going to do a pulse check. How are you feeling? Is everyone okay? It's a lot, right? Doing this is a lot. But here's the thing. I have a not-so-secret secret for you. And this secret is something that I myself have been learning and unlearning with the help of, I'm going to call her out right now, my amazing co-founder of the Disruptors Leadership Academy. Wave to the people, Steph Galante. Right? I've been learning this from her as well, still learning. And that is that we also need to prioritize our self-care as a disruptor. Yep, you heard me right. Prioritizing our self-care is disrupting. Mind blown emoji, right there. Boom. All right, listen. I want to remind you that we don't have to do this on a big scale. You can literally disrupt day to day with something as small as your own thoughts. But action needs to come from those thoughts as well. And a part of that action is that you need to keep committing to this over and over again. It just is. Because it's going to get hard. And you can't run away to bathe your cat. It can bathe itself. Also, it starts with you, right? Your biases, your perspectives, your learning, unlearning, relearning. You listening to understand and not just to respond. And also remembering that recommitting might change your role at that moment. And that is a big part of that self-care that I was talking about. Because sometimes, I don't know about y'all, but we don't want to be taking action all the time. Sometimes we're just tired and burnt out. And that's okay. Because guess what? Rest is also an action. It's a verb, right? It's an action. Taking time to rest is a form of disruption. Not being perfect, like me here today, is a form of disruption. Giving your platform to voices that are less heard is a form of disruption. Taking a step back and censoring someone with marginalized identities is a form of disruption. All right. I want to leave you with this, a challenge. Let's call it a disruption challenge. Are you ready? If you're taking notes, you can take notes, you can take a picture of this one. What is one small disruption you can commit to this week? Yeah. I challenge you to answer this and shoot me an email. DM me. Hit me up. Send a smoke signal, something. Let me know what you have done. Or, you can disrupt and be like, I'm disrupting. I'm not sending her anything at all. That's fine too. But I challenge you to do something. I challenge you to not just say you are a disruptor, be a disruptor. Thank you. And if you have any questions, happy to answer them now or afterwards. I can't really see you, but hi. It's a lot of glare.
We got the mic, yeah. Go ahead, yeah.
A little bit.
Any luck, Tyrone?
It's okay. I'm
there you are.
relatively
Oh, there you
loud.
are.
You mentioned grand gestures, and
Yes.
I appreciate that, and that's kind of oriented toward my question, which is, I think you even mentioned that folks can be well-intentioned, but
Yes.
I've sat in so many DEI training sessions with vendors, and it tends to seem so performative to me because we leave without, kind of any action to take, and also I feel like there's an orientation toward using, certain terms and jargon, and it just all sounds the same. And it doesn't sound sincere, and it doesn't seem like anything comes from it. So if you're that person sitting in one of these sessions and you're just like, oh my gosh, if I hear this term one more time without any meaning, like what can you do?
Ask what it means. What do you mean by that? Because a lot of the times when people talk about DEI, sometimes they're only talking about diversity.
Right.
Right? So I would be like, can we get a dictionary definition or something so we're all on the same page as to what we're talking about? To start off with, of course. But I feel like based on what you said, everyone needs to have an understanding of what you are all discussing. Because yes, it will come across performative if you're just saying DEI, 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 and then there's nothing happening after that, right?
Right.
So start there and see
Thanks.
where that goes.
And a quick follow-up, I hear from colleagues, this is not the case for me, but, some folks are kind of conflict averse. I love being a disruptor. It's one of my favorite hobbies. But for those who, are very conflict averse or shy or what have you, what suggestions do you have for those folks?
Yeah, I think for them, it's kind of like my client who I gave the story about, in that they have to take some time to really think about how they want to approach a situation. Because, I'll give you an example I'm sure many can relate to. You know how sometimes when we're having an argument with someone and then like 2 days later in the shower, you're like, dang it, I should have said that. Right? Sometimes it's like that, where you have to take a step back and really figure out, okay, I don't really like conflict, but how can I approach this or approach this person in a way that is not gonna be a confrontation, right? And as I said, it's okay if it doesn't happen right then and there. It's never too late to go back to it. Hope that helps.
I got you right here, Mitch. Hey,
Hi.
how are you?
Fancy meeting you here.
Right? I actually have a question about after all the disruptions have happened and primary stakeholders have done the work and the DEIB is shown and all of the statistics show that there's more acceptance for any specific identity. How do you ensure that those disruptions persist and that the dominant context is actually adapted to whatever disruptive tactic you've used?
Assessments. We have to assess them. Because if we leave that part out of what we're doing, then yes, it may seem like it's working right now, but do we really know for sure if it's going to keep working when new people join, right? When we have different identities coming in, does it work? How can you know that it works for every identity under the sun? It's kind of impossible unless we keep assessing. It's part of the cycle and it has to keep happening. Yeah. Iteration is my favorite word.
We have one more
by the
right
way.
here.
This is fantastic. I too have sat in so many DE&I things where it's all jargon.
Yeah.
And the company I work for now is definitely committed. They don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk.
Okay.
And they allow space for content to be redone or
Nice.
conversations to be held. So I appreciate that.
Yes.
I am a little concerned that this backlash with DE&I is going to take some of the policies that companies have now and start defunding. In your professional, you're nodding. So my question to you is, in your professional opinion, do you share that concern? And as a disruptor, what kinds of things can we do to make sure that doesn't happen, right?
Yeah. Totally share that concern. I mean, it's a little bit scary out there. sometimes, and especially in certain states that will remain nameless. But we all know who I'm talking about. But I think, it's a great question, and it's also a tough question, because I think it really depends, for me, on the situation. How much leeway, the people who are making the decisions, are they ready to actually disrupt? Because sometimes the ones who hold those purse strings aren't really ready to face the backlash. They aren't really ready to put something on the line, because that's what it's about. You can't sit and say you're a disruptor and not be willing to put something on the line. And I would, recommend anyone here to take a look at Bettina Love's, any talk Bettina Love gives on co-conspiratorship. Oh my goodness. She talks about that so well, putting something on the line. It's needed if we're going to do that. And one of the things, and I credit this to Bettina Love, she always says, our privileges is like a bank where we can cash out and it still keeps refilling, right? She says it's much better than I just did. But, so cash out. And maybe sometimes the people with the purse strings need to cash out. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Abbiola.
Thank you.